greetings from India. First of all, I would like to convey our collective reverential greetings to Gurudev Sri Sri Ravi Shankar Ji for his valuable wisdom that he is sharing with all of us, for all the work that he and his organizations are doing across the world, both for the social and spiritual upliftment of the masses. Our greetings to you, Gurudev Ji. I would also like to acknowledge the works of Sri M, who has made it to share his thoughts on the village story as he walked the length and breadth of the country, India, which essentially lives in its villages. And I'm sure it brought hope, peace, unity to this country, to the countrymen. Our greetings to you also, Sri MG. Our acknowledgement and the greetings to Dr. James Doty, Stanford University School of Medicine, for chairing this session. It's nice to meet you again, Dr. James. And last but not the least, I would like to acknowledge the good work being done by Dr. Sani Anand, Dr. Sundar Kamath, and the rest of the team of Sai Global Mission in organizing this conference. I think this is the sixth one in a row, which has brought out several wonderful ideas on solving several issues, especially in the village ecosystem, and turning our villages into ideal villages, not just smart villages, but ideal villages. Our grateful acknowledgements to all of you. Today, it is our collective honor as an institution and also in my individual capacity to share a few thoughts on this topic of the pandemic enabled inner journey to seek within. It's a very well crafted, very well thought of topic because pandemic is seen as an adversity, but it seems like this topic seems to convey that pandemic is an opportunity and not an adversity. As we often hear, man's adversity is God's opportunity. And this pandemic is something of that sort. Though on the surface it looks like an adversity, it truly has turned out to be an opportunity in various ways. I'm sure in the other sessions, many other topics related to its social, economic, or its cultural aspects have been discussed. And today I'm here to discuss about the spiritual aspect of this pandemic, how it has enabled us to seek that inner strength within, which is the solution to all the problems in the world that we face today, including the pandemic itself. It's like the answer that lies in the question. The very pandemic is an opportunity to find the solutions to all the problems in the world, not just in the villages, but in urban areas and in every place where we live as human societies. Last 2 years almost has been a game changer, a kind of a disruptive event in the history of humankind. While we often hear of this word disruption, which is a huge deviation from the so-called normal, this one is something that has created a new normal. And the new normal is not only at the social, economic, or geopolitical levels, but more importantly at a very individual inner level. I remember when the pandemic struck, there was pandemonium everywhere. People did not know what to do with it and what was in store for them. There was so much of uncertainty, anxiety, and the media was rolling out stories of horror, many of them illusory and imaginary, creating great anxiety, fear, depression, frustration in people around the world. And all of a sudden, all the support systems that they ever depended on, be it their wealth, family, ability to deal with situations, their intelligence, everything started to fall apart. And this novel virus did not spare anyone, the rich and the poor, the mighty and the weak, the learned and the illiterate, the rural and the urban. Everybody was equally vulnerable to this one issue. And that is when something happened. And people could not find peace, solution, or respite outside. They had to turn within. And I would like to call that the Buddha moment. When Siddhartha Gautama, a young, promising prince, son to a great father, was the king somewhere in Nepal at that time, was protected by his father because he was afraid that, according to the prediction of some astrologer or a sage, his son may turn out to be a monk instead of a king. And so he protected him so fiercely, guarded him so very zealously. He never allowed him to see anybody who was old or anybody who was crippled or sick or anybody who was dying. He was always given the best of the food, clothes, comforts. And if anybody turned old or sick in the palace, they would be removed and replaced by somebody young and handsome. So this young 19-year-old Prince Siddhartha Gautama lived in a world of his own, far away from the truth, far away from the reality. Till one fine day, he ventured out on his own into the town. And then he met the first person who looked very different to him. The skin had all wrinkles, who was stooping, who was trembling, seemed ugly, deformed. And he asked his charioteer, "What's wrong with this person? What happened to him?" And the charioteer replied, as we all know, that he's nothing wrong with him. He's fine. He's just grown old. And that was the first time Siddhartha Gautama came to know that old age exists. And he asked in disbelief, "Will that happen to me too?" And the charioteer said, "Yes, it would. It happens to everyone. Everyone grows old." And that was a shock for this young man. As they moved forward, he met another person, another man, who was lying in a corner, groaning in pain, suffering. And all his people, kith and kin, had left him. And he asked again, "What's wrong with this person?" And the charioteer replied, "Oh, he's just sick. He has contracted some infection, which is contagious, and therefore people left him alone to suffer." And he asked, "Could that happen to me too?" The charioteer said, "In all probability, yes. People can fall sick. And when they fall sick, it may happen that people will abandon them for the fear of infection. That's something like what happened during the COVID times." And that was the second shock for this young man. As he moved forward, he saw a dead man being carried away by a few people in a funeral procession. And he had never seen a funeral. He didn't know that death exists. So that was the ultimate nail in the coffin. And he realized that death also happens to everyone, just like old age or sickness. These incidents changed his perspective. While he was thinking, like most do, that life will go on, it's an endless party, and nothing will go wrong ever. And they feel so safe, cocooned in their own little world, created by their own selves, between their friends, family, their wealth, their position in the society, the name, authority, and so on. But then something like this pandemic happens, and that becomes the Buddha moment for all of us. So this young Gautama returned to his palace, all perplexed, confused, anxious to know what the truth is. For he did not want to invest his time and energy in this body that would eventually grow old and decay and die. He did not want to invest his time and energy in people who would leave him should there be an issue like the pandemic or infectious disease. He did not know what he was to do with his life, and he sought answers to his questions outside. And he found none. And that is when he decided to turn within. And that Buddha movement happened to so many people during this pandemic, where people could not find answers to such questions about the ephemerality of life, transience of pleasures, to this temporariness of relationships and the body itself. They were forced, in a way, to find answers within. So, as they say, the only way out is the way in. And that's what happened to many people around the world. What so many spiritual organizations, gurus, and teachers could not achieve in a century, it was achieved in just a year or less than that by this pandemic. Whole world was brought to a grinding halt. Everyone was stopped in their track, and everyone was made to think. Everybody was made to question their belief systems, their support systems. And all were equal in the misery, the sorrow, the grief of loss of a loved one, in the fear of the future, in the possibility of uncertainties and death. Everybody was equal. So in a way, the pandemic was a great leveler. And all of them had to turn within for answers. And this has happened across. So while at an individual level, people did turn within and to find peace, solace, rest, refuge, respite within themselves. They took to yoga, they took meditations, they took to several other spiritual wellness programs, online and offline. They read books, they learned scriptures, and tried to find answers to these problems. And finally, they all realized that you cannot resist this problem, you cannot remove this problem, you cannot eliminate this problem. Yes, vaccines were created, and to some extent, it does provide some defense against an issue, a virus like this, but that's not the ultimate solution. The ultimate solution out of this pandemonium was to find an inner strength, a strength from within. When your physical strength cannot deal with it, when all your intellectual strength cannot deal with it, when your emotional strength seems weak in front of such an issue, the only strength left with somebody is the inner spiritual strength. And that spiritual strength is about acceptance. Resistance is the outward way, the pravritti marga, as they say. Acceptance and surrender is the nivritti marga, or the way within, the inward journey. And that's what happened. Now we have learned, we have accepted to live with this issue, knowing fully well the consequences of it. And that acceptance has brought peace to so many people. Now, if I have to extrapolate it to suit the conference in terms of the ideal village conference, so what's ideal about this situation from a rural perspective? For those who have traveled in India or many such countries where there are many villages, as you know, in India, there are more than maybe 6.5, 7 lakh villages. And 65% of Indian population lives in villages. You go to any village in India, small or big, you may not find a hospital there, you may not find an education institution, you may not find even roads, you may not find internet connectivity. But one thing you'll find for sure is a spiritual center in the village, which could be a temple of the local god or deity, or it could be another institution like a spiritual institution that is run by some sage, or some spiritual personality existing in every village who becomes the center of their lives. Whenever such a pandemic or an issue strikes a village, the first reaction of theirs is not to resist, fight, and cry foul, but rather turn towards that center where they will find peace, where they can pray together, where they can feel united with each other, where collectively they decide to work together to solve the problem. And these centers of spirituality or centers of religion in every single village of the country were the source of the inner strength that helped people unknowingly undertake this inner journey every day. People would wake up, they will hear the temple bell or the prayer emanating from any other place of worship, and their mind would naturally be kind of diverted from all their daily mundane chores to this idea of inner self, inner journey. And that was a part and parcel of Indian culture, the village culture. But unfortunately, with passage of time, the urbanization happened, and most of the people, for the sake of jobs or better economic prospects, they left their rural homeland and they went to cities and settled down there, and the culture there was very, very different. So if you see, we have institutions where children come from many villages. And I asked them, how was this pandemic and what did you do at home? How was it for you? It seems like nobody even understood there was a pandemic because they were quite happy. There was pure air, pure water. They were cut off from most of the infected areas or the cities where the infections were spreading. And most of the children were playing, and they even were learning from their parents their traditional skills or their professional skills, as they knew in their family whatever was running in their family for generations. So they benefited. Think of it from the urban point of view. Most of the kids were locked down in their homes and with their gadgets, and they could not go out and play. The only thing they could do is to play on their phones And it was a great setback for the children in the cities. Think of an ideal village surroundings, and that's why in India, schools were situated in forests or far away from the cities. There were residential schools called Gurukula, that is what we also run, and we have seen the benefits of it. So the system of education or the social structure of Indian societies, which emanated from the villages, remain the backbone for this country's survival over centuries despite several invasions and other events. And I think pandemic has made people turn towards this culture again. Many people have taken to, as I said, reading of scriptures. In fact, we did too. Many people studied Kathopanishad, which is an ancient scripture, a philosophical scripture, and very interesting one and very relevant one to the present times, because it's about a conversation between the Lord of Death, very relevant in COVID times, and a young seeker in his pre-teens called Nachiketa. And they have the conversation about life and death and what happens after death and what happens later on, what is the truth. And all the students, staff, and devotees, they learn these great truths with great interest because the occasion demanded that. The situations were such which made them think about death and what happens afterwards and what is the essence of life and things like that. And this idea has spread to so many people around the world. While some are pursuing it feverishly, sincerely, determinedly, mildly, but there are many more who might just forget it. So I just hope that this pandemic does not become a flash in the pan for them. Rather, they kind of take it very seriously that this is the only way. The way within is the way out. Otherwise, there is no other way. Our scripture says, Nanya Panthayanaya Vidyate. This is the only way, there is no other way. And what is the way? To know the truth of your divinity which is within. And today it's not even being debated. Even the scientists are talking about unified field theory and talking about these forces which are the fundamental basis of all existence. They talk about all world being energy. We all know that E equals to mc squared. We know the energy is all matter. Matter turns into energy. So we are all basically bundles of energy, walking, talking, interacting with each other. And where do we get this positive energy to make our surroundings positive? When we develop pure emotions, pure thoughts, when we develop positive thoughts, not the thoughts of fear, anxiety, frustration, depression, but the thoughts of compassion, kindness, empathy, love, then the energies change. And then we change the world around us. So prayers, positive thoughts are so important in these times to help the whole world heal from a situation like this. This pandemic has taught us this great lesson. And in a way, it is good that it happened right in the beginning of this century and the millennium, so that for all the centuries to come, this lesson remains with us to find that inner strength within, like the Buddha did, like Nachiketa of Kathopanishad did. And in our scriptures, we call such a person as Dhira. It's a very typical word which does not have an equivalent in English language. But let me try and explain it. Dhira is someone who is courageous, someone who is curious, someone who is adventurous, someone who is very patient, someone who has tremendous capacity to bear, to wait. And such a person alone is capable of knowing this truth within. And such a person, what does he do? It says this, all the senses, mind, everything has been created by the Lord as outgoing ones. They always seek pleasures, they always seek comforts outside. But somebody, the kind of a Dhira, turns his gaze within to find the answers within, to find the truth within. And in that truth, he is liberated from all the fear and anxiety. And that's exactly what we have got to do in order to bring the world its best in terms of being able to face any situation in the future. Vaccine or no vaccine, medicines or no medicines, social distancing, no social distancing. These are all ways and means to deal with this problem on the outside, on the surface, but deep down within. The real solution to this problem is when we all turn within and know the truth that there is only one divinity, one consciousness that permeates everything, insentient and sentient. And in that awareness, when we start living, we tend to live a better life. We become better versions of ourselves. We are more compassionate, more kind, more empathetic to our fellow beings. We are more sensitive to their sufferings. We are less greedy, less selfish, less rude to each other. And that is what this pandemic should leave behind, a different world, a new world, a paradigm shift from what it was. So I would rather think of the whole of humanity or human societies as the pre-pandemic society and the post-pandemic society. And I'm sure there is going to be a world of difference between the two. The next generation has seen something which they had never seen. And this has made them all think and question the very fundamentals of life and existence. And this is what will turn them inwards. And we need to be ready as people who are aware of this truth to provide answers to those curious young minds like Nachiketa. And that would be our contribution, our education system, our parenting, our social culture, even national policy. Everything should be redefined to help our children, our youngsters, our people learn this inward path so that they're better prepared for the future. For future is always uncertain. But dealing with uncertainty could be with anxiety or could be with confidence and courage. And what we teach them now is what is going to keep them in good stead for all times to come. This is one pandemic. There could be many in the future. We do not know. But having learned many lessons from this lesson of inner journey be the uppermost lesson, which will help us to deal with such situations in the future, then we would have done a good job with our present generation. We would have prepared them better, made them future ready, as they say, with this inner strength to deal with uncertainties, to deal with pandemics and chaos in the society. I really hope, as our scriptures pray, Sarve Bhavantu Sukhinah, let all be happy. Sarve Santu Niramaya, let all be healthy. Sarve Bhadrani Pashyantu, let all see good and auspicious things everywhere. Ma kaschit dukkha bhag bhaved, let nobody experience any sorrow or pain. Because now we know that we can be happy only when the whole world is happy. We can be healthy only when the entire world is healthy. We can only see good if everybody is doing good and we are doing good. And there won't be any pain if we don't inflict it upon each other. So let us live according to these ancient ideals which were core to the Indian culture. Indian culture, as I said, lived in its villages, in the hearts of the village people. And that is how it is an ideal village conference and not just a smart village or an advanced village conference. And this idealism of spirituality must permeate, must spread to one and all across the world for us to create a better world, better future for our children and for all generations to come. Once again, I would like to thank all the organizers, Dr. James Doty, the very esteemed panelists on this session, and I wish them all the very well, all the very best for many future such endeavors. And I'm sure this will bring clarity and will help many more people think right. And I really hope that this session will go a long way in setting our thinking right and encourage people to pursue this path within and not just seek comfort outside. Thanking one and all for this wonderful session, I would like to conclude. Namaste.